Have you ever stopped to consider that truth is one of the most important pillars in any relationship? Recognizing when someone isn't being sincere can mean the difference between building genuine connections or living in a world of illusions. In relationships with women, this ability becomes even more valuable, allowing you to make decisions based on reality rather than false assumptions. Stoic philosophy, developed more than 2,000 years ago, offers powerful principles that can be applied to sharpen your perception. Ancient Stoics like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius taught that wisdom comes from careful observation and control of one's own emotions. Exactly what you need to detect lies without being overwhelmed by impulsive reactions. Imagine having the ability to see beyond words, to understand what's really happening when something doesn't feel right. This isn't a skill for manipulating or controlling others, but rather for protecting your inner peace and ensuring that your decisions are based on facts, not fabrications. In the intricate world of interpersonal relationships, especially with the opposite sex, recognizing signs of dishonesty can save not only your time and energy, but also your emotional integrity. It's about seeing the truth so you can act in line with it, a deeply Stoic principle. Human relationships are like intricate webs, formed by countless subtle interactions and implied meanings. When you find yourself facing a woman, whether she's your partner, a friend, a coworker, or someone you've just met, you're engaged in a dance of words, expressions, and gestures carrying multiple layers of meaning. In this complex choreography, trust acts as the invisible thread holding everything together. When dishonesty severs that thread, the entire structure of the relationship can collapse. You've probably felt that internal unease, that suspicion that arises when something just doesn't line up. This is your natural instinct for self-preservation, picking up on inconsistencies. Over the course of human evolution, we developed sophisticated mechanisms to identify signs of deception, an essential skill for our social survival. In modern life, with its many distractions and technology-mediated communication, many men have lost touch with this innate ability. Lies in relationships can range from minor omissions to elaborate distortions of reality. Some are told to avoid conflict, others to gain an advantage, and some simply out of habit. Regardless of the motivation, when you learn to spot them, you gain the power to choose how to respond, making decisions based on knowledge rather than ignorance. This power of discernment is especially important in romantic relationships, where emotional investment is high and the consequences of dishonesty can be devastating. How many men have seen their lives turned upside down because they missed obvious signs of deception? How many relationships could have been saved or ended at the right time if the signals had been correctly interpreted? By improving your ability to detect lies, you not only protect yourself from potential manipulation, but also create space for more authentic relationships. After all, when both sides know that dishonesty will be noticed, there's a natural incentive for transparency and truth. Truth is the cornerstone on which lasting, meaningful relationships are built. If you build connections based on lies, you're essentially building on quicksand. Sooner or later, the ground will give way. Imagine investing years in a relationship only to discover that key elements were mere fabrications. Your time, your most precious and non-renewable resource, wasted on a reality that never actually existed. Or worse, consider the men who make life-changing decisions based on false information provided by women they trusted completely. The ability to detect lies is not about paranoia or chronic distrust. It's about being attentive, present, and aware in your interactions. It's about honoring your own discernment and intuition. When you can separate truth from falsehood, your decisions become more solid, your relationships more genuine, and your path clearer. In professional circles, this skill can keep you from becoming entangled in compromising situations or doomed projects. In friendships, it helps you place your loyalty with people who truly deserve it. And in romantic relationships, it can be the difference between a partnership grounded in mutual respect and a dynamic of constant manipulation. Lie detection also serves as a natural filter. Those with something to hide eventually shy away from someone who can see through their masks. On the other hand, Honest and transparent people will feel comfortable and valued by your ability to recognize their authenticity. Remember, though, that this skill comes with responsibility. Detecting a lie doesn't necessarily mean confronting it immediately or with hostility. Wisdom lies in deciding when and how to act on that knowledge, something Stoicism has much to teach us. Stoicism, a philosophy born in ancient Greece and later adopted by influential Romans, offers a set of principles that align perfectly with the art of detecting lies. More than just a philosophical school, Stoicism is a practical guide for living wisely and peacefully in a world that's often chaotic and deceptive. At the heart of Stoic thought is the distinction between what we can and cannot control. You can't control whether someone decides to lie to you, but you can control your own perception and your response to that perception. This fundamental principle transforms lie detection from a reactive, emotional task into a balanced, rational process. The Stoics taught the importance of careful observation and delayed judgment, the very approach you need when determining the sincerity of a woman's words. Instead of reacting impulsively at the first suspicion, a Stoic practitioner watches, gathers information, and only then forms an opinion based on evidence rather than fleeting emotions. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." This reminder of intellectual humility tells us that even when suspecting a lie, we must remain open to alternative explanations, an antidote to paranoia and irrational distrust. Meanwhile, Epictetus taught, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." If you enter a relationship naively believing you could never be deceived, you create a dangerous blind spot that can easily be exploited. Stoicism encourages a mind that's open but vigilant. Stoic calmness, the ability to remain composed even in the face of unsettling discoveries, is equally valuable for detecting lies. When you find out you've been deceived, anger can cloud your judgment and lead to reactions that only make things worse. The Stoic acknowledges the lie, accepts reality as it is, and decides on the next step with mental clarity. Finally, Stoicism holds personal integrity above all else. By developing your capacity to detect lies, you're not just protecting yourself, but also reaffirming your commitment to truth and authenticity, core virtues in Stoic philosophy. Armed with these principles, you're ready to explore the specific signals that reveal when a woman might be deceiving you. Each of these indicators, observed through the Stoic lens, becomes a powerful tool for uncovering the truth in your relationships. Body language is perhaps the most revealing channel of truth, operating largely at the subconscious level. While words can be carefully rehearsed, the body often leaks information that contradicts the verbal narrative. To the attentive, these signals are like an open book, showing what's really going on in a woman's mind. Pay close attention to the eyes, often called the windows of the soul for good reason. When a woman avoids eye contact at specific points in the conversation, it may indicate discomfort with what she's saying. Yet, be aware that, too, much eye contact can also seem suspicious. An overly fixed gaze can be a conscious attempt to appear sincere, an effort that rarely happens naturally. Micro-expressions, brief flashes of genuine emotion that last only a fraction of a second before being suppressed, are particularly revealing. A tiny twitch at the corner of the mouth, a slight furrowing of the brows, a quick flare of the nostrils. These nearly imperceptible cues can completely contradict the verbal message being delivered. Watch the hands. A woman who is lying often feels an unconscious need to occupy them, adjusting jewelry, touching her face, playing with her hair, or fiddling with nearby objects. These self-soothing gestures help ease the internal tension generated by lying. Posture also tells a story. Subtle distancing, leaning back, or turning part of her body away from you can indicate a psychological retreat, an unconscious attempt to create space between herself and the lie she's telling. Likewise, crossing. Her arms or legs can be a defensive stance, as though protecting herself from the potential consequences of dishonesty. Observe the synchrony between different parts of the body. When someone is authentic, their gestures, facial expressions, and words naturally align. Incongruence, like smiling while talking about something sad or shaking the head no while saying yes, can signal that something about the presented narrative isn't right. Stoic philosophy teaches us to observe these signals with mindful attention, but without jumping to conclusions. A woman may show nervousness for many reasons unrelated to lying: social anxiety, attraction, or discomfort with the topic. Wisdom is in gathering these signals as pieces of a larger puzzle, rather than treating them as conclusive evidence by themselves. As Marcus Aurelius advised, do not be troubled by the forms of things. Rather, see what is real. When watching body language, remain grounded in the moment, noting what you genuinely observe, not what you fear or expect to see. This stoic objectivity is what turns casual observation into an effective tool for discernment. While body language tells us a great deal, verbal communication also provides valuable clues. Word choice, speech rhythm, and linguistic quirks can reveal subtle inconsistencies that indicate when a woman isn't being completely honest. Pay attention to unusual pauses or hesitations in speech. When someone is inventing a lie on the spot, they often need extra moments to piece the story together, resulting in odd breaks that disrupt the natural flow of conversation. These hesitations are especially telling when they occur before answering. Direct, simple questions that shouldn't require much thought. A change in vocal tone is another powerful indicator. A slight pitch elevation can suggest tension or nervousness associated with lying. Some women, when not being truthful, may also speak at a lower volume, almost as though their body is reluctant to project words it knows are untrue. Notice the overuse of qualifiers. Phrases like, to be honest, frankly, believe me, to tell you the truth. Ironically, these expressions that seem to emphasize sincerity are often used when sincerity is lacking, as if trying to verbally compensate for the absence of truth. Linguistic distancing is a subtle but significant clue. A woman who's lying may unconsciously create space between herself and the lie, using fewer personal pronouns, I, my, and more detached constructions. Instead of saying, I didn't pick up your phone, she might say, that phone wasn't touched by me. A more formal and distant approach. Overly detailed or unnecessarily elaborate answers to simple questions also deserve scrutiny. While some people are naturally verbose, providing irrelevant details often suggests an attempt to seem more credible or to distract you from the main point being avoided. Another verbal cue is repeating your questions word for word before answering, a tactic to buy time. Similarly, rhetorical questions like, why would I lie about that? Or, do you really think I'd do that? Serve to deflect and put you on the defensive, derailing your inquiry. Stoic philosophy encourages active listening, not just to the words spoken, but also to those left unsaid. As Epictetus noted, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. By practicing this stoic listening, patient, attentive, and free from premature judgment, you develop a sensitivity to verbal patterns that may indicate dishonesty. Keep in mind that variations in verbal communication can also be shaped by factors like nervousness, cultural differences, or personal communication style. Consistency, or the lack of it, over time provides the most reliable insights into the truthfulness of what's being said. Everyone develops relatively consistent behavior patterns over time. Knowing these baseline patterns is key to spotting when something is off. Sudden changes in a woman's usual behavior can be one of the most reliable signs that something isn't being shared with you. Pay attention to shifts in routine that lack a clear explanation. For example, a woman who's always been available by phone might suddenly become unreachable at specific times. Someone who never cared about privacy might suddenly guard her phone with a password, or a partner who develops a sudden intense interest that requires time away from you. All these changes warrant mindful attention. Communication patterns can also undergo revealing shifts. If she usually responds to messages promptly but suddenly takes hours on certain days, if someone who's typically talkative starts giving short answers, or if a straightforward speaker becomes evasive, These inconsistencies can indicate something's being hidden. Changes in personal style also deserve notice. A sudden focus on appearance, new clothes, different makeup, or a new hairstyle aren't necessarily signs of dishonesty by themselves, but when combined with other indicators, they can be part of a bigger pattern of undisclosed motivations. Eating and sleeping habits can also be affected by the stress of maintaining lies. Loss of appetite, insomnia, or changes in alcohol consumption can suggest a troubled conscience, though they can naturally stem from many other life factors as well. The Stoic philosopher Seneca observed that time discovers truth. This patient viewpoint is invaluable when watching for behavioral changes. Rather than reacting impulsively to the first shift you notice, observe the pattern over time. Temporary changes might be due to passing stress or external circumstances, while persistent ones are more likely to indicate something meaningful. The Stoic approach also reminds us to distinguish between the behavior itself and our judgments about it. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Keep an open mind to alternative explanations, but don't ignore your intuition when multiple behavioral changes converge to suggest something is being concealed. Such caution doesn't mean dismissing clear evidence, but approaching what you notice with the wisdom of understanding that human behavior has multiple causes. It's precisely this Stoic moderation, neither blind naivete nor unjustified paranoia, that makes observing behavioral changes such a powerful tool for discerning truth. One of the most telling patterns of dishonesty is the tendency to avoid specifics. When a woman is telling the truth about something she actually experienced, she can usually provide rich sensory and contextual details, even about events that happened some time ago. Fabricated stories, on the other hand, typically lack this vivid texture of real experience. Take note when direct questions are consistently answered in vague or general ways. "I was busy with some work stuff," instead of naming the actual project she's been working on. "I went out with some people," instead of mentioning who they were. "I was just around," instead of stating specific places. These patterns of vagueness are serious red flags. Equally telling is strategic deflection when asked for specifics. A common tactic is to answer a different question than the one asked, or to offer tangential information in hopes that the original inquiry is forgotten. For instance, if you ask, "Who were you with last night?" and the reply is, "Don't you trust me?" or "The restaurant was so crowded we could barely talk," the core question is being sidestepped. Watch out for inconsistency in the amount of detail provided. More sophisticated lies often include overly detailed portions of the story to seem credible, but remain suspiciously vague on crucial points. This contrast in detail density is especially revealing. Truth tellers usually have more details about what mattered and fewer about the unimportant parts. Another sign is the inability to expand on or elaborate parts of the narrative when questioned. Someone who truly experienced an event can zoom in on any section of the story with more detail, whereas a fabricated story often doesn't. Have that flexibility, because only certain aspects were rehearsed. Stoic philosophy emphasizes clarity and precision in thought and communication. As Epictetus advised, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." This appreciation for accuracy naturally heightens our alertness when someone consistently avoids being specific, not by chance but by necessity. At the same time, Stoicism warns against hasty conclusions. There are legitimate reasons someone might be vague, anything from genuinely poor memory to protecting someone else's privacy. The key is observing persistent patterns of avoidance, especially around specific topics, while keeping open to other possibilities. As with all aspects of lie detection, it's the convergence of multiple signals that forms the clearest picture. Someone who's occasionally vague isn't necessarily dishonest, but a person who's consistently imprecise about certain subjects. Deflects direct questions and can't elaborate when asked is demonstrating a pattern that warrants closer scrutiny. Emotions are powerful messengers of inner truth when expressed authentically. However, when someone is lying, there's often a disconnect between the emotional content that fits the situation and what actually surfaces. These disproportionate emotional reactions, whether excessive or insufficient, can be significant indicators that something isn't aligned. Watch for emotional intensity that seems exaggerated for the context. An explosive reaction to a seemingly harmless question can be a preemptive defense mechanism, creating an emotionally charged environment to discourage further inquiry. If you notice that a simple question about where she was triggers a disproportionately strong response, it might mean the question has touched a guarded area. Equally telling is the absence of emotion where you would normally expect it. A flat, neutral reaction to news that would typically prompt surprise, excitement, or sadness may suggest she already knew the information or is emotionally disconnected, possibly because she's navigating the territory of deception. Timing of emotional responses also deserves attention. Genuine emotional expressions have a natural synchronicity with the trigger. When emotions seem slightly delayed, like she's intellectually processing what the appropriate response should be, then displaying it, that can indicate a calculated performance rather than an authentic reaction. Particularly revealing is the inability to sustain an emotional display. A person who's genuinely sad or angry maintains a consistent emotional state. When you notice quick swings, moments where the mask slips and the underlying emotion surfaces before quickly being suppressed, you're glimpsing the tension between a staged facade and the real emotional state. Stoic philosophy gives us a valuable perspective for interpreting these signals. Stoics recognize the importance of emotions as information about our view of the world, but also emphasized not letting them control us. This balanced approach lets you observe disproportionate emotional reactions clearly, without being swept into the drama they create. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Applied to observing others, you can note when their reactions don't match the events, a disconnect that often indicates deeper issues at play. Remember, though, that people have different expressive styles and emotional histories. Some are naturally more expressive, others more reserved. It's a person's deviation from her usual emotional baseline, disproportionate in relation to her own typical responses, not some abstract standard, that offers the most reliable information about potential dishonesty. While exaggerated emotional reactions can be striking, a total lack of emotional involvement can be just as revealing. When a woman seems detached or uninterested during significant conversations, she may be, consciously or unconsciously, using emotional distance to avoid the vulnerability that comes with truth. Notice the quality of presence during your interactions. Someone who's being deceptive often shows subtle signs of disengagement, constantly checking the time or her phone, offering generic remarks that don't require emotional investment, or maintaining a neutral facial expression that reveals little about her internal state. Closed-off body language, crossed arms, rigid posture, minimal expressive movement can indicate a deliberate barrier meant to keep emotional distance. Likewise, a lack of reciprocity in conversations, failing to respond to smiles, ignoring emotional cues, or avoiding follow-up questions suggests someone who's sidestepping deeper connection. Particularly telling is the inconsistency between verbal statements and emotional investment. If she claims something is very important to her, but talks about it with apparent indifference, or says she's so excited about future plans yet shows no real enthusiasm, this mismatch often points to words that don't reflect true feelings. Selective engagement is also worth noting. If she's emotionally present and invested in certain topics but oddly distant in others, that contrast may highlight areas where honesty comes at a higher cost. Stoicism, with its focus on authenticity and personal integrity, gives us a valuable lens through which to interpret such detachment. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When you repeatedly see a gap between someone's words and her emotional energy, you might be witnessing the internal dissonance created by dishonesty. However, emotional distance can arise from many sources: past trauma, depression, stress, or simply a more reserved interpersonal style. It's the shift from her usual pattern, a normally expressive person suddenly becoming disengaged in specific scenarios, that most reliably indicates possible deceit. Truth has an inherent consistency that's hard to fake over time. When someone tells the truth, different versions of the same story, even told at different times, maintain a fundamental coherence because they're anchored in real events. Lies, on the other hand, often suffer from narrative drift, small and large inconsistencies that accumulate each time the story is repeated. Pay attention to discrepancies in timelines. Details such as the times, sequence of events, and duration are particularly vulnerable to inconsistencies in fabricated narratives. If she once mentioned leaving work at 6 p.m., but later puts herself in a different place at that same time, that temporal mismatch can be telling. Characters in the story are equally important. Who was present, who said what, and how people interacted are elements that often change in false narratives. Though genuine human memory is imperfect, it tends to preserve the basic interpersonal relationships of a real event. Notice, too, any shift in how she depicts her own role. In true stories, a person generally remains consistent in how they portray their actions and motivations. In a fabricated account, her part may evolve to look more favorable or less culpable as the story improves over time. Particularly revealing is how certain she seems about details. Someone telling the truth might honestly admit to not remembering some points and stick with that uncertainty. A dishonest person may initially appear unsure about a detail, but later present it with absolute conviction, or the reverse, a pattern suggesting that the narrative is being strategically adjusted. Stoic philosophy, with its high regard for internal consistency, primes us to notice such discrepancies. Seneca observed, "Truth never damages a cause that is just." This perspective encourages us to watch patiently how stories evolve, noting where consistency breaks down. One effective approach is to ask the same questions at different times, phrased slightly differently. The truth, anchored in reality, remains consistent no matter how a question is posed. Fabrications, however, often depend on specific wording and can vary when rephrased, revealing their constructed nature. Still, a Stoic mindset reminds us that genuine human memory is naturally imperfect. Small variations are normal even in honest accounts. It's the pattern of significant inconsistencies, especially around central points of the narrative, that signals potential dishonesty, not minor discrepancies typical of human recall. Integrating behavioral observation with Stoic principles provides a holistic and powerful approach to detecting lies. It's not just about picking up individual signs, but recognizing convergent patterns that together form a clearer picture of what's happening. This synthesis of external awareness and internal wisdom sets apart the truly perceptive man. When you integrate all the signals discussed, body language, verbal communication, behavioral changes, avoidance of specifics, disproportionate emotional reactions, lack of engagement, and story inconsistencies, you arrive at a far more reliable method of discernment than relying on any single indicator. The Stoic approach teaches us to observe without reacting prematurely. As Epictetus advised, control your perceptions. Let nature take its course, then nothing can harm you. This stance of conscious observation allows you to gather information without being consumed by the anxiety or anger that often comes with the suspicion of deceit. At the same time, Stoics placed a high value on truth, not just as an abstract concept, but as something crucial for living virtuously. Seneca argued that the greatest wealth is to live content with little, for sufficiency is from the mind, not possessions. Similarly, true richness in your relationships comes from shared authenticity, not from amassing superficial connections built on falsehoods. This integration of careful observation and philosophical principles creates the ideal mindset for spotting lies, alert yet not paranoid, skeptical yet not cynical, confident in your perception while remaining open to contrary evidence. It's a stance that recognizes the imperfection of human perception, but still trusts in our innate ability to detect inconsistencies. As you carry this integrated approach into your daily life, you're not just improving your ability to detect a particular lie. You're developing a more refined sensitivity to truth in all its forms, a skill that will enrich every dimension of your life, from romantic relationships to professional interactions and personal friendships. Beyond identifying the signs of lying, Stoicism offers practical tools you can use to strengthen your own relationship with truth and refine your discernment in everyday interactions. These methods not only sharpen your ability to spot deceit, but also cultivate an inner state of clarity and balance. The practice of mindfulness, being fully present in the moment, is essential. Many signals of dishonesty are subtle and fleeting, easily missed when your attention is scattered. Develop the habit of giving your full focus during important conversations, removing distractions, and truly observing not just words, but the whole person in front of you. Socratic questioning, the art of asking open, non-accusatory questions, is a powerful tool. Instead of confronting potential lies with direct accusations, use prompts that encourage the other person to elaborate. "Can you tell me more about that?" Or, "How did you feel at that moment?" Invites the person to expand the story, potentially revealing inconsistencies or difficulty inventing details. The practice of suspended judgment is essential. The Stoics emphasize not jumping to conclusions before having sufficient evidence. When you sense a possible lie, resist the urge to confront immediately or fixate on one interpretation. Instead, make a mental note and keep gathering information until a clear pattern emerges. Developing self-awareness is just as important. Our own insecurities, past experiences, and biases can skew our perception. By knowing yourself better, you become more capable of distinguishing legitimate suspicion grounded in evidence from mere projections based on personal fears or expectations. Empathic cognition, the ability to understand someone's perspective without necessarily agreeing, also enhances discernment. By considering possible motivations behind seemingly dishonest behaviors, you broaden your understanding of the situation and avoid simplistic explanations. A powerful Stoic exercise is premeditatio malorum, anticipating difficulties. Applied to relationships, this means acknowledging the possibility of dishonesty ahead of time and mentally preparing for it, reducing the emotional shock if you do discover lies. Finally, building emotional resilience is crucial. Learning that someone you trust has deceived you can be deeply upsetting. The Stoic practice of separating external events from internal responses allows you to face such discoveries with equanimity, making decisions based on wisdom rather than impulsive reactions. Used consistently, these tools not only heighten your skill in detecting lies, but also strengthen your character and foster relationships built on authenticity and mutual respect. In our contemporary world, filled with digital interactions and rapidly evolving social dynamics, the skill of detecting lies is more valuable and yet more challenging than ever. Modern technologies have created new arenas for dishonesty, but also new clues for those who pay close attention. Digital communication lacks the nonverbal cues traditionally used to spot lies. Text messages, emails, and social media interactions don't convey vocal tone, body language, or facial expressions. In this context, you need to develop new discernment skills, focusing on response times, word choices, and communication patterns. Look for inconsistencies between someone's online persona and offline behavior. Many people present highly curated versions of themselves online, which can significantly conflict with their real-life actions. These discrepancies aren't necessarily intentional lies, but may reveal areas of inauthenticity worth noting. Information overload also affects our capacity for discernment. In a world of constant media bombardment, our attention is fragmented and deep observation becomes harder. The Stoic practice of simplification and focus is a vital remedy, creating moments of mindful awareness in the midst of information chaos. Relationships themselves are evolving at breakneck speed. Concepts like fidelity, commitment, and honesty are continually being renegotiated in a society undergoing rapid change. Being clear about your own values and expectations becomes essential for assessing authenticity in these shifting conditions. Stoic wisdom, despite its ancient roots, remains remarkably relevant for navigating such modern complexities. As Marcus Aurelius noted, "Do not be disturbed by the multiplicity of things. Hold on to your principles and return to yourself." This advice resonates profoundly in our hyper-connected, often disorienting world. Modern life's fast pace also impacts discernment. The constant pressure for quick responses and decisions creates an environment where thoughtful reflection, critical for detecting lies, often yields to efficiency. The Stoic practice of deliberately slowing down, especially in times of uncertainty, becomes a powerful form of resistance against this pressure. In this contemporary setting, the signs of dishonesty discussed earlier remain valid. They've just taken on new forms and manifestations. The ability to incorporate them into an adaptive approach informed by both ancient wisdom and modern realities is what marks the truly perceptive man of the 21st century. To solidify our understanding of these indicators, it's helpful to look at concrete examples where detecting dishonesty made a significant difference. These illustrations not only bring clarity to the concepts, but also show how these signs appear in real-life scenarios. Consider the case of Mark, who started noticing subtle changes in his girlfriend's behavior. Messages that she used to answer promptly were now left unanswered for hours at specific times of day. When he asked about it, she gave vague explanations about being busy at work, but avoided going into details. During conversations about these missing hours, Mark noticed that she held less eye contact and often touched her neck, a soothing gesture he rarely saw in other discussions. Instead of confronting her with accusations right away, Mark took a stoic approach. He observed the pattern for a few weeks, occasionally asking open-ended questions about her day. Eventually, he noticed inconsistencies in her explanations about where she had been on certain afternoons. When they finally had an open conversation, she admitted she'd secretly been going to therapy sessions, something she felt embarrassed to share. This example shows that while signs of dishonesty can point to hidden truths, those truths aren't always malicious. By contrast, consider Ryan's experience in a corporate setting. His new coworker regularly took credit for others' ideas and became extremely defensive over simple questions. In meetings, Ryan noted that this colleague demonstrated selective engagement, intensely involved in high-visibility projects, but obviously uninterested in equally important yet less glamorous work. Over time, inconsistencies in the coworker's stories about his professional background added up. Applying the Stoic principles of patient observation and suspended judgment, Ryan gathered enough information to justify a more formal check of the coworker's credentials, which revealed substantial fabrications in his resume. This case shows how multiple signs of dishonesty, when observed collectively over time, can expose unethical patterns of behavior. Another telling example is Andrew's experience with a woman he met on a dating app. In their early chats, he noticed she frequently avoided direct answers about her personal life, skillfully steering the conversation elsewhere. On the few occasions she mentioned her past, Andrew noticed subtle inconsistencies in timelines, references to being in different places during the same time period she'd described earlier. When they finally met in person, Andrew saw that her body language became noticeably tense when certain topics arose, especially questions about her current job. Rather than pushing these points or dismissing her entirely, Andrew practiced a cautious curiosity, balancing openness with discernment, a fundamentally stoic posture. Eventually, he discovered she had recently left an abusive relationship and was understandably hesitant to share personal details. The inconsistencies in her story mainly stemmed from trying to protect her privacy while rebuilding her life. These examples highlight an essential fact. Indicators of dishonesty don't always signal malicious intent or a desire to do harm. Sometimes people hide information out of shame, fear, self-protection, or even concern for others' feelings. Stoic wisdom teaches us to notice these indicators not for immediate condemnation, but to seek deeper understanding of the truth in its many nuances. At the same time, these stories show how a convergence of signs, behavioral changes, avoidance of details, narrative inconsistencies, disproportionate emotional reactions, and more, provides a far more reliable picture than any single cue could. It's this holistic pattern that the perceptive man learns to recognize and interpret. The journey to mastering the art of detecting lies isn't about nurturing constant suspicion. It's about cultivating sharp discernment, a skill that, paradoxically, can lead to deeper and more genuine connections. By identifying and gently addressing dishonesty, you create a space for more profound truths to emerge, even if those truths are initially uncomfortable. Stoic philosophy, with its emphasis on the pursuit of virtue and wisdom, reminds us continually that our ultimate goal is not just to spot lies, but to cultivate relationships grounded in truth, mutual respect, and authenticity. As Seneca pointed out, it's not the man who has too little that is poor, but the one who hankers after more. Similarly, it's not how many relationships you have that enriches your life, but rather the depth and quality of the genuine bonds you form. Armed with the signals and principles discussed here, you're better prepared to navigate the complicated terrain of human relationships, not as someone paranoid or perpetually doubtful, but as a wise, attentive individual who can see beyond appearances and prioritize truth above all else. The ability to detect lies is just one facet of a far more valuable skill: the ability to discern truth in all its forms. And this capacity, as the ancient Stoics knew, is essential not only for successful relationships, but for a life lived with wisdom, integrity, and purpose. Bringing our exploration of these 7 signs to a close, it's important to remember that the ultimate aim extends far beyond identifying falsehood. It's an invitation to a more conscious and authentic way of relating, to others and to yourself. The Stoic principles underlying this discussion remind us that while we can't control whether others choose honesty, we have full control over our own integrity and how we respond to the truths we uncover. That may be the most valuable lesson of all, that real strength lies not just in seeing through others' deceptions, but in staying unwaveringly committed to your own inner truth. When you become proficient at distinguishing fact from fiction, something transformative happens. Superficial connections fall away, while relationships founded on mutual authenticity flourish. People who value honesty will be drawn to your clear, direct presence, while those hiding something will find your transparency uncomfortable. Keep in mind that this skill, like any other, improves through conscious practice. Begin by paying more attention to the small details in your daily interactions. Notice patterns without rushing to judgment. Ask open-ended questions that invite deeper elaboration. Stay anchored in your values and the types of connections you want to foster. And perhaps most importantly, apply these principles with compassion. All of us at some point resort to small lies or omissions, usually motivated by fear, embarrassment, or a desire to protect ourselves or others. True wisdom is recognizing the difference between these human slips and systematic patterns of dishonesty that undermine the very foundation of trust. The truly wise man doesn't merely detect lies, he creates a safe space where truth can exist. By modeling integrity in your own words and actions, you silently invite others to do the same. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Likewise, the best response to dishonesty isn't retaliation or harsh judgment, but a deeper commitment to your own authenticity. By integrating these skills of discernment into your life, you're not just shielding yourself from deception. You're cultivating a higher form of relating, one that honors both truth and our shared human experience. That's the promise, and the power of a Stoic-based approach to detecting lies. Not just seeing clearly, but living virtuously in the light of that clarity. Take these signs and principles into your daily life. Watch them in action. Refine your perception. And above all, use this knowledge not to divide, but to connect, to foster relationships where truth can thrive and authenticity becomes not just possible, but inevitable.